So it may not be obvious from how little I talk about it, but I have played Mega Man, most of the mainline games, and I enjoyed them quite a lot as a kid. I recently replayed them for context and to put Mighty Number 9 in better perspective, and I've gotta say, it's hard to see what the big fuss is about the license. A lot of people expect things from Mega Man, and many of those expectations carried over to Mighty Number 9. That being said, I'm not sure those expectations line up so well with reality. Let's start with the small things about the Mega Man series and then move our way up from there. Firstly, the stories in Mega Man can't really be called bad, because in the mainline series they rarely try to be anything. The games that most obviously try to make you give a shit about the story are Mega Man 4 and Mega Man 7. Even Mega Man 8, which puts a greater emphasis on its story than most, just kinda feels like nothing. The music in the series, which I've heard endless and endless praise about, it sure is alright. Sometimes the melodies are absolutely excellent, and sometimes they're just okay, but it's all fairly standard platforming 8-bit music, and it pales in comparison to something like Sunsoft's compositions. The music also, for the most part, lacks anything that makes it sound like its own thing. I can't listen to a Mega Man soundtrack and say, that sounds Mega Man-y, because it just sounds like normal 8-bit action game music. The one time Mega Man seemed to make a genuine effort to put a stylistic difference between it and other video game music was Mega Man 7, which sounds really weird. The instruments used in that game are incredibly over-stylized, and there's a weird contrast between everything and a whole lot of high notes. And I get why some people feel that's kind of a weird direction to take the series, but when I listen to Mega Man 7 music, I instantly know that's where it's from. Now on to the obviously more important part, the gameplay and game design of the main series. The games are intentionally bullshit. There's a lot of unavoidable damage and instant death traps. Enemies are placed in intentionally irritating places to annoy the player as much as physically possible, and it's unlikely for you not to get hit several times by an enemy type before you figure out what it actually does. And by the time you do figure out what that enemy type does, how it works, and where exactly you need to stand or jump to not get fucked, you're already doomed because your health is so low that you're going to get fucked by the next enemy type. And that's to say nothing of enemies or hazards that are just placed in places that the designers know is unfair and ridiculous. The games are heavily memorization and trial and error focused, and I'm not a big fan of that. I think if you're going to have trial and error focused gameplay, then it should have a sense of rhythm to it. See Donkey Kong Country, for example, or Sonic the Hedgehog, or Mighty Number 9. Mainline Mega Man games, though, really lack any kind of meaningful reward from memorizing the entire level beyond, hey, I memorized the entire level. This is in general, of course, and there are some stages and some games that are significantly less bullshit than others. For example, there are quite a few stages in Mega Man 7 which a person who's a fan of normal 2D platformers might even be able to complete. Imagine that. Now, the trial and error level design may not be so bad if the levels were generally interesting to traverse or looked good, but the level design in the mainline series is often bland and lacking in artistic flair or engaging or creative gimmicks. The standouts are Mega Man 8, 11, and especially 10, which all have excellent visual design and excellent level gimmicks. Especially 10, I want to stress, which has the best level design in the series, from an artistic standpoint. And I would much better understand the appeal of the series if all of the levels were as well designed as they are in Mega Man 10, and they were all that creative and had that many fun gimmicks, but on average they do not. So all I've really seen upon replaying the mainline Mega Man series is, well, it sure is a really hard 2D platforming series focused on trial and error. What stands out most positively about the series is the weapon switching gimmick, and the fact that the games are more beatable than other NES games. I feel it was important to bring this up so that later we can talk more about the contrasts and similarities between Mighty Number 9 and Mega Man. But for now, let's go back to Mighty Number 9. So, there are some challenge missions in Mighty Number 9 which are made to help you get a better grasp of the game mechanics. In this challenge mission, we're supposed to get a combo of 10. Now, in order to build a combo, you have to get 100% absorption rate many times in a row. A 100% absorption rate happens when you absorb an enemy immediately after destabilizing it. If you wait before absorbing an enemy, then you will not get a 100% absorption rate, you will get a lesser absorption rate, and your combo will be destroyed. The average absorption rate percentage also counts towards your score at the end of the level. And next we're going to take a brief look at this mission, which shows us how to use the dash properly for platforming, because there's one bit in here that's really important that a lot of people seem to struggle with. So right up here, we will see a hazard that we cannot regular dash under. This one right here, so we hold down and then dash. You see that? Hold down and then dash. You see what you do there is you hold down and then dash. It's amazing how that works. We're going to need to keep that in mind for later, because apparently some people think that just because a mechanic is not often mandatory means it has no usage. I don't know why people think that, but you're going to see it's wrong in this upcoming stage in a few ways. Anyway, that's it for this one. So let's move on to the real level of this video.
System ready? Go!
Brand! I'm warning you, Beck! Stay away! Brand, wait! I'm going after him, Professor!
Affirmative, Beck. Just be sure to mind your step traversing those vehicles.
So we chose this level first because this level is a great one to show off rhythm, and it's also a great one to talk about how people are bad at video games. So some of the best example of rhythm in this level are these flying signs. You want to shoot them when they get close and dash into them immediately. They only take one hit to become destabilized, so they're basically a free plus to your combo. And the way they come at you means you have to vary up your shots. You can also dash in the center of some of the patterns if you're feeling really lucky like that. Up ahead there are wheel enemies in a pit, and we can use what is called an action shift by holding down R2 and pressing square. I'm showing it to you multiple times because the game moves very fast, so I don't have a lot of time to explain. But the idea is that Beck jumps backwards and shoots downward diagonally. This is very useful when you don't want to jump into a pit of enemies, and more people should use this mechanic. They say it's too situational to be useful, but they are wrong. There are also people that say the signs are too difficult to see against the background, and I have to wonder if their eyeballs are okay. I do not mean that in a sort of insulting sense. I mean, I'm genuinely concerned whether their eyeballs work alright. Because my eyes aren't great, but I can still tell the signs are coming at me and they're not part of the scenery. An important thing to remember about platforming on the cars is you want to land in the center of the car, because the slopes on the car, they're actual slopes. They do have slope physics, even if they're minor slope physics. So I said we would talk about what the different colors mean. Now's a good time to do that. Red gives you a powered shot, which lets you shoot through multiple enemies. We already discussed that. Green makes you go faster. If you absorb enough blue enemies, you get an E-tank. And yellow gives you a defense up. These are all very practical buffs to have during gameplay. The least practical one is probably the speed up, but you should probably be going fast anyway, because that's the fun part, is going fast. The platforming across cars and vehicles is fairly basic, especially with your dash ability. Oh, here's an arena-styled section. It's worth noting that these wheels only take one shot and then they become destabilized. That's very important for this arena segment. It makes it a lot easier. And it's true this arena segment can be difficult. This pit right here absolutely floods with enemies during the final wave. So, you know, it's fair to get hit a few times. It's not fair to say the damage is unavoidable because you have access to the action shift, which is useful in many situations, including this one. Like this, see? See how I'm shooting diagonally at the enemies? Cool, right? How that works. It's pretty neat. It's almost like that move was designed so you wouldn't bitch about unavoidable damage in situations where the damage is avoidable. But what would I know? So we're now on to the final stretch of the level. I don't think this stretch is any more difficult than the previous two. In fact, it may be a little bit easier. The hardest thing about this stretch of the level is the flying enemies that block your pathway while you're jumping between cars. But you can easily dash underneath them after you destroy the little satellites they poop out. If you really want to play it safe, though, they can also be destroyed quite easily. So I don't get why people have so much issue with those. You do have to wait for the cars, which are platforms in this case, to get reasonable distance from each other. Like, they have to get reasonably close before you jump, but that should go without saying, right? That you should make sure the cars are close enough for you to jump before you actually jump. Oh, here's a cool section. Brand will cut some of the cars in two. It's always the car in the centermost area of the screen. It's always the middle car. And it's very well telegraphed, so I can't imagine getting hit by this if you've ever played an action game before, because there's a very clear line showing you where he's about to strike, except right there. For some reason, that cross line, those two cross lines, they don't mean anything, which seems like pretty bad, because you might jump off a car and fall into a pit trying to dodge that cross, that blue cross, which doesn't actually do anything. Anyway, that's pretty much it. We're pretty much to the boss battle. And it wasn't my goal to beat this stage in one life, just because people have so much issue with this stage and I'm really that petty. But yeah, the boss fight is right up here.
But he's not like Beck.
My blades hunger! Why, Beck? Why won't you give up?
I'm here to help. I've come to save you, Brand.
No closer! One more step, and my blades will have their way with you!
Brand, tell me what's happening.
I can't control myself! If you want to save me, you must destroy me! Say, ha! Must slice, must dice! Ha!
Phew!
Yes! Predictable! Say, ha! Must slice, must dice!
Fight, William!
My body! My blades! They have a will all their own!
Fight it, Brand! I'll save you, I promise!
Yes! Strike me down! Above you! Above you! Ha! You must destroy this end now! My blades hunger!
Come on! Snap out of it! Now!
Beck, I thank you.
Mission clear!
Now, you might have missed it, but one of those attacks, one of those blade attacks that were indicated by a blue line, could only be dodged using the crouch dash that was shown earlier. And there are other attacks that can only be dodged using the crouch dash, it's just no one seems to use it. And I didn't want to talk over that boss battle, because I love that boss battle, and I thought it looked really cool on its own. It was a very tense boss battle, it got my heart pounding both the first time I beat him and this time, because I was trying to do it without dying.
Jiminy! Attaboy, Beck! Come on, Will! Show a bit of enthusiasm!
Perhaps you should show a bit of restraint, Dr. Sanda. This is only the beginning. Cole, please transfer Beck's assimilated cell data over to my terminal. I want to begin my analysis and see if I can isolate the root of the malfunction.
Right away, Professor White.
Incidentally, Sanda, I caught a bit of news on the way here. The president of Cherry Dynamics was insisting the source of the incident is Dr. Blackwell.
What? Poppycock! Blackwell is a genius, but he couldn't possibly be behind this.
You must admit, there are similarities to his last plot to shut down every robot in America.
You mean how they both originated at the Battle Coliseum? But he was caught and arrested. Even Blackwell isn't clever enough to pull this off from inside a maximum security prison.
Indeed. I wonder why Mr. Graham seems so certain. Well, enough of that. There's data to sift through. Sonda, can you continue assisting Beck?
Absolutely. Let me know as soon as you discover anything.
Now it's time for a couple more challenge missions. These ones are meant to show us the new power we got, which is Brand's Sword. Brand's Sword is a very close range move, which is very useful for this game in particular, where you want to be close to the enemies to absorb them for the maximum absorption rate. This challenge mission is basically to show you the exact length of the sword, how far you can expect it to go when you swing it, and some of its other utilities if you plan on using some of its special moves, which I won't do here. But swinging the sword by itself does not require any extra energy, so it's a decent secondary weapon. You know, it can be used as a replacement for the basic shot in many circumstances, and I would recommend that.
Mission clear.
And this challenge mission, which is the last thing we're going to look at before we stop the video, is just to show you that Brand's sword can deflect projectiles. Most projectiles. Not all of them, but most. And how you deflect the projectiles is you mash attack. Is it elegant? No. Is it effective? Yes. That's really all that matters. You know, you don't have to time it expertly or anything. You can just mash the square button to deflect projectiles. And that's what this challenge mission is supposed to teach you. Does what it's supposed to do. Now, I've seen people complain that the game mechanics are not made clear to the player and the game doesn't teach you while you play. That's stupid. And those people are being silly. It's true, the game doesn't teach you while you play unless you make an effort to learn about the mechanics. But that's not a bad thing. Fighting games don't teach you how to play as you play. Character action games often don't do that either. Neither do some shoot-em-ups, and in fact, neither do most mainline Mega Man games. Teaching the player how to play while they play should not be mandatory.